3 seconds to go. Well, hello everybody and welcome to our round table. I'm just going to click in here on some slides, which I'll just quickly go through before we start today's session. So just bear with me for a couple of seconds. So this is the FME Expert Round Table, and we're very fortunate with the people who are joining us here today. The presenters, you know a little bit about me. Mark Ireland from Safe Software, of recent times or more recent times, What's Up Wednesdays. So we're taking the What's Up Wednesdays and we're sort of implementing it here to our virtual world tour. Unfortunately for us, Brett Madsen, who is going to join us, has got some personal health issues, so he can't join us here today. So I got on the blower to our good old friend Bruce Harold from ESRI, and he very kindly said yes, he can jump in today. It's always great to hear from Bruce. He has some great insights, and I'm sure you'll hear something from him today that'll be of interest. From the Locust team, we've got Darren, we've got Kieran, and we've got Pip, and you've heard from all of those people earlier on during the course of the week. Just before we get into the agenda, I just want to plug again, if I can, just the prizes that we have for some supercar experiences in New Zealand and Australia. So just a reminder, you do need to attend 2 sessions and to complete the World Tour feedback form, which will be coming your way soon from Angie. Today's agenda, we've got 3 items which we're going to kick off with, but of course we'll take your feedback coming through from questions, etc. They're self-explanatory. I'm going to hand over the first one, how FME has changed to meet the now and the future of integration, to Mark Ireland, who's going to kick us off, and we'll go from there. So Mark, over to you.
Thanks, John, and thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm really honoured to be here. One quick thing I did want to mention before we got totally started was if Matthew from Electra is still here, I talked to our folks back at Safe, and your certificate should be in the email by now. So congratulations. I'll metaphorically hand over your certification.
There you go, folks. That's how you get certification. Come on board with the presentation as well.
That's going to
be helpful.
So yeah, I mean, it's a good question about where FME's come from and where we're going to and how we got where we are. I mean, we're on that Gartner Magic Quadrant, and I look at that, and we're sort of on the less visionary side of the chart. And I always think, well, I thought we actually got quite a good vision of where we're going and what we're doing. Considering, like, I've been working with FME for about 15 years now, and I'm guessing quite a few of you have used FME for a long time as well. And where we are today is just light years ahead of where we used to be. And I don't think we could have got there without having a good vision for the product. And I think, to me, one of the biggest changes that we made was moving to the cloud in particular, because I think a couple of your talks have mentioned that, like Sarah in her talk yesterday talked about moving systems to the cloud, and Matthew earlier today was talking about the same thing. And I mean, I think it's a good job that I'm not in charge of vision, because to me, being able to read a shapefile out of Dropbox, well, that was like, wow, that's great. But it's way more than that these days. And I think we've gone a long way to try and work with cloud formats, because everybody's moving their data and their systems onto the cloud. And so, we've got lots of connector transformers in FME now, so we can connect to all of these different cloud services. We're trying to work on APIs as well, and that's one of the things I think for a future direction is we're going to be able to connect to more APIs to just make calling HTTP a lot easier. We're probably going to look at open standards like the Open API, and so I think when we talk about, well, what's got FME to where it is today, I think investing in cloud technology early on really helped us a lot to get to where we are. And I don't think that's going to change in the future. I think this is just going to be more and more of a trend that we're working on in terms of, well, high volumes of data, and the APIs, and of course performance as well, because nobody ever complains that your software runs too fast. And so I think a lot of those things all sort of tie together. The cloud, the APIs, the performance, all sort of come together to get us where we are. And I think it's what's going to drive things on in the future. So that's my opening point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can talk to that as well. Sorry, John, I can talk to that as well. And look, so I've been working with FME, for a few years, but really since working with Locus for the last 3 years, you're getting into that whole real enterprise type scenario, FME desktop, FME server. Yeah. And if you kind of put desktop to the wayside just for a moment and you look at the changes over server, even just in the last couple of years, we've gone from topics, notifications, setting up an email, publications and subscriptions, being real hard work, right? You really need to go through the documentation. Your first attempt was never a workable attempt, right? Real hard work into, a whole automations now, that works, triggers, actions. It's just so much more refined, cleaner, easier to use. You want a webhook, great. Create one in an automation, give it to a system, it's dynamic now, it's fully orchestrated, and that's all in such a short space of time. And then even recently, we've got, not only have you got dynamic engines, but you've got the ability to route jobs now, a whole host of things, functionality that you have around how jobs are processed in FME server, that you didn't have before. So yeah, I mean, it's actually hard, Mark, right, to kind of keep up with what's happening.
Oh, it is,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm more of a desktop person, but server, just blows my mind. And that's really where I think a lot of the vision has come from. We can improve on desktop, but without server and without cloud as well, we'd be nothing now, I don't think.
So, Kieran, I think
that's kind of the thing that I've sort of seen develop as well. Is when I got first introduced to FME, it was very much felt like almost a desktop GIS data product, and the way to me was model builder on steroids, which kind of was true for what the product was at the time. And then I think more so you were kind of looking at it like, here's some GIS data, I need to manipulate it in some way, shape or form, and probably write it into our SDE database. And I'm sure John's probably maybe got a stat on how many people have bought FME purely to do that. Would be, the LINS WFS services, which almost everyone in the country needs access to, and they need that data loaded into their enterprise database. Whereas now you kind of look at it and the product is more like, I've got some data that's in a format that isn't really a format, it's just information. I want to be notified and I want a trigger to be set up so that when that data is updated, we actually read it, manipulate it, whether that's over an FTP or an API or something. If it comes in a zip because it's gone over FTP, then we want to unzip it, then start doing where it initially was, and then load it into our database. So it's that full, rather than take it as just the data in a file format that we know, let's take the whole process end to end and do that analysis in the middle as well.
Pip, I know that a little bit more recent exposure to FME, but even within that short period of time, has there been anything in particular that you've noticed that you can comment on?
Probably not quite similar to Kieran, come from a GIS background where it's predominantly desktop, and then now the more kind of solutions that you can put together with server.
Yeah, and actually one of the things, John, I'll just come in with Pip on that as well, because we do quite a lot of work collaboratively, and one of the things that we see, is working with, the server API, and all the work that's kind of done there, and that's something Pip likes to play with as well, Pip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty clever.
So, and actually that's another good thing about Safe Software. You find lots of vendors what they do is they have like maybe something that's quite functional and good, and everybody kind of buys into it. And then the next thing they find out, like the API is locked down, right? It's got very limited functionality. So what it means is it's really hard to integrate it and use it with other systems, or you need a specialist to be able to engage with to be able to do that. Pip's come from, like Auckland Airport, and no server experience. And now she's working on big projects, developing with desktop, developing with server, and being able to use the REST interface to do some really cool things. I mean, Pip, I think tell everybody about what you were recently doing with using the REST API on server to generate all the commits that you could do with FME Server. You did something with that, didn't you?
Oh, looking at the version control.
Yeah, totally.
When you're doing an upgrade, it doesn't keep the version control history, but with the help of some of the FME community, can use the API to pull out the workspace and actually turn it into a FMW file. So then you get a history.
So lots of cool things there, yeah.
Cool.
Bruce, I know that you're always abreast of developments, desktop and server. I know you've been using FME probably for possibly even longer than Mark. I'm not quite sure about that, but maybe 15 years plus, I would have thought at least.
Yeah, some order of that. Yeah.
We were doing things together way back then. Anything in particular that you've observed over that time in terms of the development of the product?
Well, first of all, full disclosure, I work at ESRI, and people should know that we do white label FME technology, right? The desktop engine, our product is a fork of FME. We don't do the same with FME Server. We have our own enterprise setup. And my job is to look ahead and see what functionality I want in our product. And by the way, it gets into FME. So things like ArcGIS Online Connector, the Portal Connector, feature service support, all these things originate from ESRI and go to Safe and turn up in our product. And it's a win-win. It's fantastic. But like you say, looking back over the years, originally, I started when Workbench was relatively new. And it was just so refreshing to be able to work at the row level on data, rather than at the time there was a model builder, but it was a different graphics engine. It was good, a step in a direction that the no-code community likes, but there's nothing like when you're really, excuse my French, anal about getting data right, working at the row level and being able to pipe streams of data here, there, and everywhere. So the progression that I've seen and contributed to is making that switchyard experience bigger, faster, better, more functional. While I'm talking, I can share some things about what's coming in terms of how the two communities, ESRI and Safe, interoperate, and that there's going to be stronger interaction between FME Server and our enterprise stack. The method will be, I'm expecting a very strong support for ESRI JSON, which is the way we move data sets around from A to B internally, to also be supported by FME Server. Yes, there's a reader and a writer for ESRI JSON, but quite frankly, it's broken at the moment. And so look forward later this year to seeing a lot of work, the benefit of that work going into it now. So that data that ages out or needs to be cooked on demand can come from an ESRI enterprise stack and be consumed by FME Cloud or desktop or on demand. So that's going to be a freebie for both sides.
Good stuff. Mark, I guess at Safe, a little bit like Bruce in a sense, you've got a little bit, you're able to look into the future a little bit ahead of us here, I guess. A
little bit, yeah.
So, so when you have those sessions, well, would we all like to have those sessions on a Friday night when you're having a quiet libation, talking about where to next? What's yours? Any sort of thoughts in that regard as to?
I mean, again, there's going to be a lot of continuation of what's gone on before already, like Bruce is talking about. A lot of integration between different systems on that level. I think in FME itself, I think version control and that sort of thing is going to be. It's definitely going to happen at some point. I mean, I'm not the product manager. I can't say that's going to happen on that score, but I can say it's going to happen because I know that's the direction we have to take. Another thing would be, like recently we had FME Server apps, which have been out a couple of years now on server. And that really is a game changer for me because I could create a workspace, I could push it to server, I could run it, but I couldn't really give it to anybody and say, why don't you try this? And so I could use that to make it available to end users now. And we're definitely moving in that direction as well. We're going to have a package building tool at some point. So you can build packages, use Python, build your own interfaces, put them all together, make connections to web services, basically package up a whole bunch of different things and wrap it up in Safe, I get, in FME, I guess. And yeah, just make it more of a more easy to pass things out to the end user, to make it more customized. So you don't have the end user has to log into server. You can present them with an app or a web page or whatever. And it's all sort of customized and GUI-fied. So
yeah, and I think one of the comments I think might have been Don made a while ago. It's hard to remember all the presentations, but it might have been a year or two ago. It's almost like people will see this end user experience and not realize FME is sitting underneath it all.
exactly,
it's just happening. Okay.
Yes,
and that sounds a little bit building upon what you just said.
It is very similar. Yes, we don't want, it's like the Wizard of Oz. I mean, you've got the guy behind a curtain that you don't see, and that's really what I guess we want FME to be, the person behind the curtain that you don't see, but it's just doing this amazing work for you. So,
Kieran,
sorry, John.
Darren. Kieran, I know that you've done a lot of work with APIs and you've done sessions for us. Just from that perspective, any observations that you'd like to share or maybe even see?
I think it's probably it's too easy for me to answer. I did my presentation on the other day, and that was really just around the use of custom transformers and the web connections. I think, and I think you touched on it before, Mark, as well, around doing more with APIs is, I mean, so many of the actual readers and writers, if you read the logs or you put logs on in the verbose kind of debug mode, you actually see that so much of it, like the ArcGIS online hosted feature service writer, I think, is using the REST API under the hood as well. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it is, I guess I'd really like to see more in that space. And I guess it's always nice to have the user community share, but also it's really nice to have a little bit of a stamp from Safe to say we probably have a bit more authority that this will work as well, although not quite that full level of a necessarily like a fully supported reader writer. It's still on the hub, so it doesn't come with maybe the same warranties. But I would say that's probably the direct. I see a lot of growth and a big opportunity would be just more of those objects which I guess simplify APIs so that they can be repurposed each time.
Bruce, I think you might have had a comment on that.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking, well, I'm totally set me up for this. I was just looking at Don and Dale's recent webinar I missed, and they're picking out some things that are proud of me for me 2022, one of which was upsert capability to a number of databases, and the more the better. And Kieran just mentioned, well, under the covers, yes, it really does use the REST endpoint, the apply edits REST endpoint when you're writing to feature services. But if you want a performant experience, and I've loaded 100 million features this way, you use the append endpoint. And that also supports upsert. So that's topical. Now, a tip for Mark to take back to the office, because I haven't got around to it yet myself, is why did you have a writer that uses append? The way it works is it pushes up a files database to the target portal and just sets it running. It really screams to get data in.
Okay.
So that's what you're doing. I've got a blog out there somewhere with the methodology that's handmade, but it should possibly be a mode for the writer.
I'm so glad you said that, Bruce, because I actually just did one the other day. I built my own exercise, but used the overwrite of the original file geodatabase and then the publish. and a two-step flow to get that up there, because I think I had 2.7 million records, and apply edits is dreadfully slow for something of that sort of scale. But
I used Append in 2 concurrent jobs, and I got 100 million features up in a couple of hours.
Wow.
You know what? Well, just on what Kieran and you guys are saying, like one of the things that we've kind of got into, Bruce. Sorry, freaking heck, your name slipped my brain there. It's like, when you have that moment, it's like, oh my God,
forgive me, Ferruccio. It's okay.
The name's gone anyway. So one of the things that's going with that, one of our clients, and I think this is a really cool thing. Actually, Kieran helped myself and Pip do this. Like sometimes in an organization, right, you don't know what you don't know, and you can either go and try and learn it, or you can leverage that somebody already works with it, because it's the most optimal approach. Why try and spend hours trying to research and try stuff when you could just talk to somebody that already does it? Anyway, so the task was this: this client was using ArcGIS Online, and they were worried after somebody accidentally deleted a whole load of features that they had no way to be able to recover that. So at the time, what they wanted to be able to do within the organizations to back up all their feature service with ArcGIS Online. It's a massive organization. They have multiple surveys that they're going out and they're acquiring information that has pictures, et cetera. So what they did was they asked us if we could create like a snapshot of every one of these feature services and have a backup that runs every day to be able to do that. And we could get into the semantics of, gosh, there's probably better ways to do this, and having processes within the organization to prevent these types of things from happening. That being said, it was an approach that they wanted to be able to do. So I approached Kieran and said, oh, look, I've just tried reading in a feature service and download the attachments. It takes forever to do it. He said, Darren, I got something for you. Here's this little workspace, it's a bit of annotation. See if you can work it out from that straight away. Like, got me right off the bat. And basically this workspace now, it goes out, hits all the feature service via the REST API, puts in a request to go and generate up a backup file geodatabase for each one of them. Waits a wee while, and actually that caught us. I'll come back to waits a wee while in a moment, but it goes off and it goes and builds those file geodatabases. Once we know and we have all the item IDs of what they are, then we go and request them and we pull them down, then we chuck them into an archive folder, job done, right? And then you can go in, you recover everything, all the features, the images, any other attachments like Word documents and stuff. So that's really cool. And then, like with anything you don't know before you go into it, one of the things that we got a little bit caught out is, every system takes time to run, right? It doesn't matter if it's cloud and it seems like it's instantaneous, right? So when we were doing it originally, and it was like 100 odd items we're putting in requests for, some items would come down, we'd get these blank zip folders with nothing in it. And I worked it out that what was happening is we needed to give it time over the other side, the server side in ArcGIS Online, to go and generate these files before we were ready. So we got quite good at working out ways to, wait and then put on a call. Hey, you ready yet? Yes, you are. No, you're not. Okay, do it again later. So that was an example of being really efficient, being able to understand and implement some solution between two different platforms, leveraging APIs. Yeah, so thanks again for that one, Kieran. That was a really good one.
Look, that might be a nice little segue just to get on to our next topic. As you can tell, one of the awesome things about FME that you can't help but observe over a period of time is how different experts from around the world, if you give them the same type of data and the same type of challenge, they're all going to get there, but they'll have their own way of getting there, I suppose. And I guess it's that discussions between them that shed a light on one process as opposed to another. Darren, I'm going to get you to kick off the next topic.
Sure.
Basically, it's the fit and evolution of FME within an organization. And, I guess if we go back to the very early days of FME here in New Zealand, it was typically, I've got some data in one file format and I need to get it into another. And FME can do that. And wow, that saves me so much time in terms of manual process, tick, and then that's it. They're very happy to have paid for it and to get that process working. But then from there, of course, in a lot of organizations, the usage just takes on a whole different complexion. So, Darren, if you'd like to kick off.
Sure. Yeah, look, very valid point. And I think every single one of us here, perhaps not so much Bruce, just because he sits slightly outside of the typical sort of engagement with FME within an organization, and the reasons, because it's obviously ESRI versus Safe Software. It's not a versus, but you know what I mean. I think one of the things I like to look at it is, it's like, what's the pitch? Right. What's the pitch to get FME within the organization? And, I suppose the pitch somewhat, it sort of varies depending on the organization and the situation, right? So when we talk about the situation, it's like, where did the idea for FME come from? So this is making the assumption that somebody within the organization, a team, a group of people, and perhaps just one person is going, oh, look, I've seen something for FME and I've identified that I've got problems within my team, or we've got problems within the organization, and I want to be able to use this product to be able to solve, specific issues. And I suppose in a perfect world, and we're not in a perfect world, but if we use the perfect world as a scenario, let's say I come up with a solution of FME, that's going to solve all my problems. And I go to my boss and I say, hey, look, I've got this product. It's going to solve this. It's going to make your life easier. And he goes, oh, great. No problem. He's on board. And then he tells another team, guess what? We're going to do this for you. And it's going to be amazing. And then they go to IT, and IT's like, yeah, sure, we'll sign that one off. That's fantastic. Right. And that's the perfect world. So it's been quite easy. Everybody gets it. Everybody collaborates. They come together. And, they're able to make FME happen, and it comes in the organization. You get the right training, and hasta la vista, baby. Matthew's a perfect example of that, right? Gets pushed through the organization. Lots of people uptake it. Massive benefit, right? But the reality is that it's never as simple as that, right? It's always more complicated. So really, usually a scenario is that you've got some people on board. It could just be one person or a couple of people that see the true benefit, but it kind of falls a bit flat because there's more groups and teams. Like, the bigger an organization is, the more people that have to believe, the more people you have to try and win over, right? And that can be a really hard task sometimes, So, I mean, in short on that, where that comes down to is being able to deliver technical, high-level presentations, have support from your vendors like Safe Software, your partners, get them to come and do presentations, let them show examples that are industry related that can help win those people over, help them understand how it's going to work for them at the different levels within the organization, from a technical perspective up to somebody that has no clue what they're talking about, but they get systems being joined together and what the benefits are. And then I suppose, like, the last sort of scenario to that is, where you've got a bit of work to do, but even if you got people won over to your side, the problem you've got is IT. And it's not just IT. So I want to be very careful. Like, I've worked with some IT departments, and they're fantastic, right? You find the right person, you give them the right information, and you're going to make stuff happen, right? What I mean is, by IT being a blockage, it's more organizational and operational, controls that are put in place to protect the organization, from, some software coming in and going off and doing a whole load of stuff that could perhaps damage the organization, or giving people access to things, and they all go off and do their own little thing, right? But it's an issue, right? It is an issue. So, how would we be able to work through that? So making some assumptions, and the assumptions being, what would be the pitch? How would we approach these types of problems? I would say the assumptions are that you're able to do something within your organization, right? And if you're not able to do anything, there are other approaches there, but let's focus on what we maybe could do. So I think the best approach, and again, Matthew, if everybody's seen the Electra presentation earlier on, absolutely, this is the best approach. Think small, right? Think small, but big wins, right? Something within the organization, like the before you dig process, that, gosh, guys, if we sort this out, right, there's only a couple of groups that need to be a part of this equation, like the asset management team and the GIS team, not the whole organization. So that's less people involved, less people that need to be a part of the frictional that can create with, well, if it doesn't have this, we don't want to be able to do it. So think small, but think big reward, okay? So if you have anything quick that's essential within the business that other people rely on, if you can tick that box and you can build a proof of concepts are always the way to go, right? Try licenses. Try licenses. Bruce, Bruce, I can see you putting your hand up there. You could absolutely talk to that part.
Yeah, well, I am kind of the same space. We have a problem of land and expand, but I was thinking while you're talking, I used to work somewhere that was very sales focused. They had an internal saying, the answer is yes, what's the question? And they weren't necessarily telling the truth. I can confidently go to any of these places with a data problem and I can say, well, the answer is yes, what's the question? And I can prove it. Right? I say,
Yeah.
give me your problem and I'll turn it around for you. And I do a lot of that. And then once they've seen it, because they can touch it, then you don't have to do any more, do you?
Yeah, and I guess I can make a comment that a couple of things I found really interesting. I guess from a financial point of view is when you have a look at the time saved, right? And I made some comments about this at the beginning of our world tour about some of the challenges in terms of human resources, which I see on the horizon for many organisations in many countries, not just in New Zealand. And I do think we're going to see the departure of a young sort of, group of people who have been cooped up in New Zealand for a couple of years. So I think we're going to see a bunch of people leaving. And it's going to be a bit of a challenge to replace them. So I think it's easier. I think people are looking at automation and saying that is part of a solution. If it's difficult to find somebody, can we in fact put in an automation? And when you look at the example that Matthew gave, I think he was talking about that dial before you dig process, Darren, where it was taking 156 human hours to do the processing of the dial before you dig. Now, the one thing I can't recall, Darren, if that was per month or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's per month. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it was going to, instead it was only 4 hours worth of basically spot testing in QA. So that's about 150 hours. If you throw $100 an hour at that, I mean, it's 15 grand, and that's a return each and every month, right? Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, yes, Bruce and Darren, you're quite right. Proof of concept shows that it can actually achieve the outcomes that you purport that it will do. But also you get this really cool benefit of saving these hours of a mundane task, which have now been automated, in which that person or team then can go on and spend those hours in a more productive capacity looking at some deeper projects. So I think that it's, from a sales perspective, if you like, let's be real about this. If it's safer trying to get more sales of FME, so is Locus, etc. So, being able to put those two together, I think is quite powerful.
I think as well, John.
I was just going to grab Kieran in here because I know that.
Oh, sorry, Kieran. Sorry, mate.
We've done a bit of work with a couple of startup clients of FME, and I think you've been able to demonstrate some quick wins as well, just to say, hey, yeah, it can do these things in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, I think it's got a big role to play in terms of, I think around the man hours kind of thing that you can eliminate very, very easily as a big selling point, and just the fact that I feel like there's a lot of sysadmin tasks that aren't necessarily required. You need an overseer rather than 3 people actually carrying out some of these activities. I found I was running a training session about a week or two, maybe 3 weeks ago now. It's all kind of turned into a bit of a blur, but a sample that it was really interesting. The group that I was training, very much a GIS group, but the 99% of the problems out there aren't really spatially focused. And I think that's probably the challenge that a lot of people are grappling with. They had a data set of dates, which are notoriously difficult or notoriously controversial in the way that they can be captured. And they get, hundreds of thousands of these records that are as many about capturing a date whatsoever. So it was quite a fun exercise, actually, showing kind of the way that we'd problem solve something like this. But I kind of thought about it afterwards, and very much we're there for a GIS training. The group's very strongly using ESRI and pulling in any other spatial data, but all of the questions and all of the problems tended to be with non-spatial elements as well, and a lot of things which I would kind of put down to just really systems. It's quite an interesting take that you can, rather than people and experts who have a really good sort of skill base in something like GIS or something that's very technical. But what we're often grappling with is this really labor-intensive
Yeah.
thing like dates, which actually isn't really related to the industry that we're working in either. So I think that's a big win in terms of being able to kind of work in that space.
Coming from a different industry, I guess it's quite interesting. The easier the job in a manual process, you'd be surprised how many errors there can be in it, because people's concentration levels just fall off a cliff after a period of time, because it's mind-numbingly boring after you're doing the same process manually for the 100th time and you've done 99. So it's it's a little bit like that old thing about doing extra study, which your kids try and tell you about. Dad, for every extra hour of study I get, I only get 10 minutes worth of value. And it's a little bit like that. It's like that extra manual process is actually going to lead to more mistakes. So
no, that's fine. I'll just say something to that as well, right? Keyword there, manual process. It's not even about, like you could really just simplify it. It's not even about the man hours you save. It's about taking the man out the process, right? Because what happens is if you've got any manual process, we're human beings, we make mistakes, right? If you've got a system that has a set amount of parameters, it's, that you're going to have as accurate a result as you can if you take the human out of it. So, back to the date thing, right? If you've got FME, it says, right, okay, well, we've got 5 different systems. They all have different date formats. Oh, and by the way, every so often we found a string in there or a space in there. All these things that we know about, let's go and chuck that in there and go and run it. It takes 2 minutes, not even 2 minutes to run, versus somebody sitting there all day manually doing it, and they get some right, they make some mistakes. Maybe they even take stuff that was right in the first place and they accidentally change it, right? So, it's just, it's so, if you can take the reliability of a human out of it, right, you're on your way to creating a better system across your organization, right, and better data information across your organization.
Present company. True.
Yeah. Mark, from your standpoint, in terms of seeing, I guess, FME sort of used by so many organizations around the world, are there any particular themes that you've picked up on over the years that I guess are themes that help convert interest into actual, somebody buying FME and then using it?
Well, I think you're right. The rapid prototyping is just like with FME. I think it's incredible how fast you can put something together and show someone this is what we can do. Like I was at a hackathon a couple of weeks ago, and we all spent 3 or 4 hours doing a project. And at the end of that time, the other teams have got some slides to show about what they might do if they took the project forward. And I've got my workspace and it's on server, and I've got my app, and the user can enter there. What did you spend your time doing? And it's just FME. You can just bang, bang, bang like that. And you can show people, even in a meeting, you ask what somebody wants and you can say, oh, I can show you that. And just
you feel like the superhero, right? You're like the superhero, man.
Yeah.
I'm that guy or that person.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And that's what we ran as a theme a few years ago, was how can we make our users into superheroes? And any time that, you can take a job that was 20 hours of manual labor and you can just condense it down to 10 minutes of FME time, well, then you're the superhero in the company. It's
that's right.
But one of the other things I just mentioned is I think more and more now we're not going into an organization for an individual person anymore. I think it's less a lone user building up FME. It's more at a higher level now. I think management, they tend to see FME used, management, at one organization will talk to another organization and you say, oh, what are you using? It's, oh, you're using FME. And then, well, we better get a demo of that. And then you start selling a subscription model instead of an individual license. And you sort of go into the whole organization at once.
And I guess that kind of comes back to that Gartner quadrant, Mark, because if all of a sudden FME's in the discussion with some of those other, some of those other options, then most definitely it's moved away from one person using FME in an organization to many people using FME. And at that point, I guess it's a slightly broader discussions that you're having, you've moved past potentially the person who's building the workspace to the architects and to the other people in the organisation that have to make those decisions and make some comparisons with some other options out there. Pip, if I can just bring you into here just for a moment, your story, I guess, is from the end user perspective, coming across FME in the first instance there at the airport. What were your sort of initial impressions in terms of how it could help you doing what you did at the time?
I think it was just removing kind of like repetitiveness out of your day-to-day and taking your BAU, automating it or putting it into something that gives you time to develop and kind of create those dream projects that you really wanted to work on, which you wouldn't normally have time.
Yeah. Darren, I think you are.
Oh, sorry, I was actually waving to Simon Allen. Hi, team.
Sorry, wave to Simon. How are you, Simon?
Well, you waved. You have to say something now.
Apologies, guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's great. Look, and we do have a couple of questions, but we do have one more topic, and it's amazing how how quickly the time does go. Third item is, Kieran, maybe you might want to pick us up here. Just in terms of best practices, start us off with maybe a best practice discussion.
Best practice.
Oh yeah, magic.
This is a dangerous one because I actually run a lot of training sessions, and I generally kind of, I wouldn't say make it up as I go along, but think on my feet and kind of go with the flow. So if someone asks something, usually there's leftover time at the end, and I kind of just try and show something that diverts from the script and the training materials, and maybe show something I've worked on if it's. And it always turns out to be one of those do as I say and not as I do kind of scenarios, because we've just finished the best practice topic. We're talking about bookmarks, we're talking about annotations, and then I go and show one of my old workspaces. So no, but very much I would say that best practice is such an important part, and it's really easy to overlook. A huge part of my job is, and I'm sure everyone's probably encountered this scenario. We've got this workspace and it does what we want it to, but the person who built it made it 5 years ago and things have changed, but we need the exact same result. We need the exact same result. And you're like, oh, well, can't be that hard if the workspace is there and it gives you what you need. Oh man, that's wrong. It comes down to one of those things that it just, because the product can do so much to understand what it's doing, unless someone kind of tells you that. So I guess really so much of it just comes down to annotation, just as you say with comments in code, that when you and you find this for yourself as well, if you work on something that's quite complicated, you come back to it even 3 weeks later. Why was I doing that? Because you've been really kind of in the detail of it at the time. So I have a colleague who a big way, and he used to sit next to me, and I was using it kind of just in child's play, I guess is what he'd call it, in terms of the complexity of what I was working with. But I would say, I don't know. Oh, I'm stuck here. Can you help me? Because he was an FME expert. That was Mike. And it would glance at my screen, say, where's your annotation? And then go back to what he was doing. And, I thought it was particularly unfriendly at the time. But in hindsight, I think he told me one day is glance at your workspace and see the overall intention for what you're trying to achieve without clicking anything. And I think that's probably the best way to look at it, is that you don't need to know the details of how each transformer is specifically configured, as long as you can understand, in these different parts, this is what we're trying to do. That can always be replicated no matter if the workspace doesn't work anymore, because you understand what's the intention of this rather than this is how the transformer is configured. Because if it's no longer working exactly as it should, you can't really tell what the intention of it was. So yeah, I think that's probably about as simple as it gets.
Could I just say something?
I was going to say, Bruce.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, Bruce, I was going to bring you in here. What's your workspace annotation like?
Sorry, me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
I
invariably annotate things so when I get back to them, I can, spin back up what I was thinking. And I was thinking of some transformers, it makes a huge difference to their functionality. There's just one thing you change. So they're easy to break. And that's if you start just poking at things.
So what I was going to say there as well is, when we talk about best practice and right approach, very often we're looking at best practice not as just a way to understand what the workspace is and what we're actually trying to carry out, but we're also doing that as a way to optimize the workspace, right? Do we do like 100, like testers, or we do conditional, logic within an attribute manager as an example, right? And, I'll give you an example. So for Extreme X, I developed a whole booking platform using FME, and in the attribute manager, I had a whole load of conditional logics that were, hey, does it meet this type? Okay, then it's this type of booking, and so on. And I had them, like, honestly, I had like about 50 nested conditions in an attribute manager, right? And I went to myself, and it was just too hard to manage, because anything that changed, it was really hard to update. I had to open up the workspace, go in there, modify it. So I decided to use an evaluate mapper where I stored it in a Google Sheet instead, all the codes, and I could generate the codes off a workspace. So that actually functionally became more optimal in the long run to be able to do that. So sometimes you've also got to ask, who is the audience? Who's supporting you within the organization that's going to be working on these workspaces? So sometimes, don't go really hard out and hide everything into these attribute managers just because you can, right? Considerate of the other people in the workspace that they might have to go and try and debug that and go, well, do I really need to do that? Does that save me half an hour, or does it save me a couple of seconds? But actually it saves more time in the long run, those people being able to understand the workspace a little bit easier. So yeah, that's what I'd probably say as a consideration on that.
Yeah, Mark.
Sorry, yeah. I was just going to say that's one of the things I've got an enhancement request about is the attribute manager, to add an extra column where you can add comments, because otherwise it just says there are multiple values here, and you're like, well, okay, but what's it doing? You don't, So I think we recognize that documentation is a bit of an issue on that attribute manager.
Mark,
we'd like to improve that.
Mark, you shared a message in the chat about before and after workspace.
Yeah.
I'd like to take us through that and perhaps make some comments on that.
Yeah, if you click on that link, it takes you to this screen where there's like a little bar down the right-hand side. You can drag it across backwards and forwards. But what I tend to do is I build my workspaces in blocks and make connections between them, but then hide the connections. And by swiping across, you can see where all the connections are in that workspace, and they're all over the place. But it doesn't matter because I've hidden them. You can't see them. So that's the sort of thing I try and do. It makes your workspace more manageable because I can take a block of transformers and I can move it somewhere else. And I'm not getting all these horrible connections all over the screen and overlapping because I've hidden them. So hiding connections and creating tunnels is a really big thing for me for workspace design. It just makes it way more modular.
It's funny, I'm so opposite from that, Mark, and it's like what John said earlier, right? So I use the little, what do you call them now? The little circular things. Not the
junctions, yeah.
I use junctions, and if I go somewhere over here, I'll have like a junction here, so it's a nice straight line. So that way I can see where everything connects. I go around. Right. So it's like I create like a little circuit round the modules, and I drop them in where they need to, right? But yeah, like it's just because I like to be able to see everything that's going on in one go,
Yeah, I used to have this question off me in a past life when you'd look at a work paper, and the test always was from the partners. It was, if you go back, like you won't maybe see that work paper for another 12 months when you actually have to look at that problem again. And if you go back 12 months, do you reckon you can actually make head or tail off that? And I kind of always told myself, you can never make too many notes. You can never have too many explanations. Because in 12 months' time or 6 months' time, when you go back to something that's used on an irregular basis, it's like, oh, my God, what did I do that? And why did I do that? And it's like, and I think, Mark, is that a fair test?
I think it is, yes. And I think that's one of the things I can suggest is maybe have a corporate standard for annotation and bookmarks. Because I saw somebody do that. There was a presentation at the user conference, last user conference.
Christchurch City Council actually have done this. And so I plugged it up to them, and they have a process of creating a workspace. And Can't say I've seen too many other organisations. I'm sure there are many other organisations that do this, but you don't kind of read about it quite so much.
Yeah.
Have you seen it very often,
and
Mark?
It's not, not a lot. I mean, it's not fun and it's not sexy to all be doing the same design and having to have your bookmarks all the same color, but it's way less fun and it's way less sexy when you come back to somebody else's workspace in like 3 years and you look at it and you're like, I don't know what it does. Yeah.
So here's a question for you.
Some questions come through, mate, that are pretty.
So I just got one last question for Mark. There is, so Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Okay, go for it.
Does Safe actually have a standard process for creating its workspaces?
We don't know. We perhaps should, but we don't do that. And I don't know. I don't know that many of our departments interact with each other to that extent, and we don't. I don't know. We use FME a lot, that's for sure. But yeah, you're right. We don't. I'm trying to wriggle out of it, and the answer is no. We don't do that. We should do it, but we don't. Bruce,
what about yourself? Do you, when you sit down and you're starting your process there, do you kind of have some checkpoints that you know you're going to work through to get to a solution?
I am so joking. I use as many Python callers as possible. No, my standard of beauty is that I use curvy connections. I go from left to right. I go in blocks, and I sometimes use tunnels if it's going to result in a zinger that goes through something else, and it's unavoidable. And I annotate each step. I know that Attribute Manager can be overloaded, so I'll go and use individual expression calculators or null attribute mapper or whatever for the purpose. It's also faster actually than conditional processing. The streams can be faster than conditional processing in Attribute Manager. But the work I tend to do, thankfully, because otherwise I get pretty bored of some of the difficult things, and that's where the fun is for me. Then I annotate it enough to give it to some other department who can actually have to deliver. So I just did that today.
Brett's managed to join us, and he's got a comment here about it's not just annotation, but the user parameters showing history, description, etc. Would you'd agree with that, Bruce?
Yeah.
Mark, any comment on that particularly?
No, I mean I'd agree as well. I mean you really have to document that as much as you can. All the parameters.
It's easy to document a single transformer without all these complex.
It is, yeah, and that I think goes back to the idea of change detection on workspaces, and which is what we're just implementing for 2022. Is you can compare two workspaces and merge parts from one to the other, and eventually I think that's going to be work up into a full version control system because again it has to. We can't really grow without having that sort of capability, I don't think.
There's one thing
just,
I was going to say.
This next one, sorry, Dan, I'll just a shout out here to Chris Trednick, who is ex-CCC, Christchurch City Council. His comment was, the big thing for me is having a large annotation up front. Oh, gosh, there's another comment and I lost it. The big thing for me is having a large annotation up front that describes who made it, why, what the workspace does, and how it gets run. Darren?
Totally. We actually train that in the advanced training course and the basic training course. It's what's it about? Give it a description. You know, what are the dependencies within this workspace, like different database connections you might need to have and so on. Summarize it, make it nice and concise, you know. And I guess coming off of that specific comment, which I 100% agree with, and is that, you know, don't just annotate because you think you have to annotate, right? You know, because, you know, we're always looking for optimization. So think about, again, back to that thing I said earlier on, when you're working with like 5 or 6 different people that your co-peers within an organization, if they're all got the same technical capability of you, right, you're going to know that they're going to know what certain things are, right? So summarize like bookmarks, make it modular, right? What is it you're trying to do here? The data that we're doing some data cleanup, dates, that's it. You don't need to go into what all the different ones are, because these other people will go, I know what an attribute manager does, I know what a tester does, and that's more optimal versus having to put a little bit more annotation in. So say, for example, I'm doing something for a client and I know the client's quite new, I'll over annotate because I'll explain to them what I'm doing at each stage. You know why? Because I want them to learn. I want them to understand. I want them to be motivated and not put off by, I'm so scared what this actually is. So yeah, that's what I'll say to that on there.
Yeah, and if I'm looking away here, folks, it's just I'm trying to keep a track on the chat comments that are coming through, and Brett just just added workspace parameters, brains not functioning, right? Look,
I just had a couple of things. Can I?
Yes, please.
I don't know if Pip or Kieran had something to say, but if I'm sort of talking over you, but
you go.
A couple of things I wanted to mention. One of them was the presentation that my colleague Ryan and I did at the last user conference called Code Smells. And it was all about how can you tell when your FME workspace isn't very good at all, and what are the key signs for that? And so that might be worth looking up. One of the things would be if you've got like 50 transformers that are all the same type, generally that's a good indication you could be doing something a bit more efficiently. So yeah, look that one up. The other thing I wanted to mention, I did have a project once where you could load an FME workspace and it would give you a report on how well it was put together in terms of best practice. And it would count how many annotations you've got in there. And if you've got, I think the ratio was like 3 to 1. So if you had like 3 transformers and 1 annotation, that was sort of the sweet spot. But if you got fewer than that, it would say, yeah, you've got too few annotations. So that's a project I got to get back to, I think, and try and implement full time. But
there used to be a Chamber of Horrors held up as an example of what not to do.
They did, yes, we did.
Hey, Mark, if you've got a second, and please make your next comment too, but if you've got a second, we've got about 3 minutes on the broadcast. If you've got a link through to that item that you can put into chat, that'll be awesome. But otherwise, just kick on with that next comment as well, please.
Oh, yes, Bruce said about the Chamber of Horrors, which was great. I used to have a slide in the training that said, this is a horrible workspace, don't do this. And then one of the people in the training one day said, that's my workspace. and after that, I sort of okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing that.
So John Ribby sent us a couple of questions there, just making sure you've got.
Do you want to pick that question up for me? Sorry, I've missed Sam Keith's question there, Darren. If you could just thumb through and find that one. Are you able to do that?
Hey team, while looking into data integration options, I've seen a bit of discussion about ELT taking over from the traditional. There's more of it. Taking over the traditional ELT processes. How do you think FME fits into the discussion?
Mark?
I think that's a good point. I did get into a discussion on Twitter with someone the other week about that. Yeah. And they were basically saying, well, it's great FME, but if you power it with a really powerful database alongside it to do some of the heavy lifting and the heavy processing, and that's where it really starts to perform. And I can see that being an option. Really.
If you're really good at SQL statements to do data engineering, you can do ELT.
You can do it in the database, and it'll run a lot, and maybe not a lot faster. I mean, we try and make it as fast as we can. But we're all about use FME in the right place where it works for you. We're not trying to force it on you. And if it works in a way that you've got a big database you want to use it with, then the performance can be pretty incredible. So,
hey Mark, I'll just give you just a short blurb here, just on your What's Up Wednesdays, just for those people that don't know.
Me? Oh yeah, look on. Find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on there, and I've got a weekly FME newsletter. I try and do live broadcasts as well, like designing workspaces and talking about the FME questions that are on the community. And if you want to look me up online on LinkedIn and Twitter, FME Evangelist on Twitter, please do that and follow along and see some of the things that we try and do. I try and make the live streams later in the afternoon to sort of time a little bit with New Zealand. So I try my best
very
there.
appreciative. We're very appreciative. There's only about 30, 40 odd seconds left. So just if people haven't seen in the chat box, Mark has sent through a link to the GitHub project that he mentioned previously. I just do want to say thank you. I'll start with the Locust team with Darren and Pip and Kieran, because Darren's headed off. He's got the next session at 2:05. So please register for that. Big shout out to Mark Ireland, Bruce Harold. Thanks so much for joining us here today and taking time out of your schedules. Pip, Kieran, awesome as usual. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to catching up with the last couple of sessions for the World Tour today. And please do send through any questions that you might have to us. I know that Bruce and Mark would be more than happy to share their knowledge with you guys as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks for
I'm
joining.
going to stop the broadcast now.